Hey, welcome back to the Barrel Proof Baseball podcast. Today, we have a special guest. We are joined by Duke University pitching coach Chris Gordon. Chris and I go back a number of years now when Chris was coaching up in Alaska for the Matsu Miners, and I was coaching the Anchorage Bucks. And we had some good battles over a couple of years up in the Alaska League. So got to know Chris really well up there and have kept in contact ever since. And so it's been really great to see him on his journey in coaching, going from NAIA through Division I as a volunteer assistant, kind of I believe it was an ops position, and now being the pitching coach at a Power 5 school. So really cool to talk to Chris about his journey and just get his thoughts on coaching in general. So I think you're really going to enjoy this. I think anybody who is coaching is going to take a lot from this conversation. I think it's valuable for players to hear as well, but definitely a lot of information from Chris in terms of moving up the ladder and continuing your coaching career, and maybe some advice thrown in there, and maybe some stories, maybe some ideas that people should keep in mind as they're trying to advance in their coaching career. So take a look at this interview with Chris Gordon. I think you'll really enjoy it. I think you're going to pull some really nice tidbits of information out from this. In addition to Chris's conversation, I would also like to tell you about ways you can support the Barrel Proof Baseball podcast. If you don't want to hear it, fast forward to my conversation with Chris. But if you do, you can go on manscaped.com and you can get things like this for 20% off using the code BPB at manscaped.com. So Manscaped sent me their Perfect Package 3.0. It's got their lawnmower 3.0. It's got a light. It's waterproof. Sent me the toner here, as well as the deodorant, the anti-chafing deodorant, and this nice travel bag. So check that out at Manscaped. They also just recently sent me the Weed Whacker for your nose and ear hair, which now that I'm 40, I think I'm supposed to start doing that. So if you're coming up on that magical age, you're probably going to want to have that on hand because you're going to need it essentially at some point in time. So might as well just get ahead of it. So grab that, manscaped.com, 20% off, free shipping using the code BPB. All right. I'll leave links below for all of these, but we've got Manscaped. We got Bottomless Coffee. Okay. Bottomless Coffee is cool. It's got a Wi-Fi enabled scale. You put your coffee beans on it. You select what kind you'd like. If you want, ground up coffee, if you want beans, if you want light, medium, dark roast, single origin, different regions. It's really cool. You set up what you want. And then once the scale reads that your coffee supply is getting low, they automatically send you more coffee. So you're not going to run out of it. So check that out. Click the link in the description box below. You'll get a free bag. If you do, I will get a free bag, which is generous. It's generous of you to buy it for you, but also for me, essentially. So yeah, check out Bottomless Coffee. There's a Patreon link if you want to be a monthly subscriber. Check that one out. If you want our Glencairn glasses or ceramic coins, send me an email at barrelproofbaseball@yahoo.com. Also, Walk-Offs and Whiskey. These guys have been great to me. They just sent me a shirt and a hat that's going to be worn in a future episode. I'm super excited about it. But check those guys out on Instagram, walkoffsandwhiskey.com. If you use the code barrelproofbaseball, all one word, you'll get 10% off on their website, walkoffsandwhiskey.com. That's about it. So check the links below, little description about my conversation with Chris, as well as all the ways you can support the podcast to help me pay the bills if you so choose to do so. That's all I got. Check this one out. Chris Gordon, Duke University pitching coach. Leave some comments below. Be sure to subscribe. Enjoy. All right, Chris Gordon, thanks so much for jumping on here with me today.
Yeah, man, I'm excited, man. It's been a long time. Good to get to catch up.
It's been way too long. I'm trying to think. It was the last time we saw each other at an AVCA or randomly in DC.
I think randomly in DC. I think when you were getting engaged, I think that weekend. So
Yeah, it was 4th of July in like 20, oh God, 17.
17,
And
yeah, I think
yeah,
so. Yeah.
and I'd either like just proposed to my now wife or was about to and probably had the ring in my pocket.
Yeah, it was the next day, I think because we saw it
Yeah.
on Facebook the next day. Yeah.
Yep. You guys just ran into you randomly. I was like, I know that guy. That's so weird. Well, it's
Small
great to
world.
catch up with you, man. It's been too long.
Absolutely.
I really want to get into kind of your path in coaching. And I think it's very interesting. And you've been a guy that's been at different levels. And now obviously being a pitching coach at Duke University and a Power Five, dude, you've come a long way from your beginnings in coaching. And I think that's a good story to tell about going through those stages of coaching and like learning about yourself as a coach and kind of cutting your teeth. And so you kind of take me through a little bit of that from how you got into coaching and where you started and all that.
Hang on. So I got into coaching because I wasn't a very good player. I couldn't keep playing, and I just loved to be around baseball. And I played in college for Danny Clark, who's now the minor league pitching coordinator for the Rangers, and he was an unbelievable teacher. Loved being around him, loved listening in the bullpen because I was a catcher and was down there a lot, and got to listen to him teach, and it kind of inspired me a little bit. And then when I got out of college, my first summer, I got a pitching job actually Danny got it for me. Basically just said, hey, you're going to go to the it was the Southern Collegiate Baseball League, Wooden Bat League there. They had a team in Johnson City. He said, you're going to go be the pitching coach there. And I was like, I don't know anything about pitching. He's like, well, you got about a month, so figure it out. And so I kind of went to school a little bit, and like all of us, we trial and error, with players. And so I did that. I actually did it for four summers. But in the meantime, I went to Science Hill High School and took a job there with Ryan Edwards, who's the head coach. Who honestly, he was so great to me. Let me make a lot of mistakes. Let me learn a lot. Ed Reed, who was a former big league catcher, was on that staff. His son played on the team, so learned a lot from him too. And that was a great summer. I actually got to coach a big leaguer. Daniel Norris was a freshman on that team, and now he's in the big leagues with Tigers. And but then I went back to my alma mater at Milligan. While I was working at Science Hill, I was working 6 to 6 at night at a paper factory, and I would come in and sleep in Ryan Edwards' office for a little while. And luckily only worked 4 nights a week. So the other nights I get a little bit of sleep, but and then would coach. And then, like I said, I got the job back at my alma mater at Milligan when Nathan Mead, one of my teammates, got the job. And I coached catchers and was the volunteer for a year when Joel Mangram, who's a minor league pitching coach in the Indians organization, now was our pitching coach. And after a year, he left, and I took that job and got to do it for 4 years. And we had some success. We had some good teams, some really good players. And then I left in the summer of 2013. So the 2014 season, I was at East Tennessee as a volunteer. Kyle Bunn was the pitching coach then. And Kyle obviously been at Clemson and Alabama and Ole Miss, and really, really smart guy. And I learned a lot from him in a year. And when he left, luckily Tony Skoll promoted me. And I was pitching coach there for 3 years. And then, Coach Skoll left to go back to his alma mater, the Citadel. And I was kind of looking for a job, and wasn't a lot of stuff out there. I was really nervous. First time I'd been without a team, and had interviewed a few places, but luckily Coach Pollard I'd known for 10 years working the camp circuit. We all work, and I'd known him for a long time. And his director of operations job opened up, and I was fortunate enough to get that job. And was here when I got here. Coach Blake, we were in the transition between Coach Mackey and Coach Blake. Coach Mackey now was the bullpen coach for the Twins last year, and then Coach Blake was our pitching coach my first 3 years here. But was the director of operations, and then he left literally the day before practice started in the spring this year to go be the Cardinals run prevention coordinator, I think is the title that they gave him. So just was fortunate to be in the right spot, the right time, and get an opportunity. And obviously, this is a dream come true, being at a place like this and with the resources that we have and the people that I can be around, the players that I can coach. It's been, I've been really fortunate. I think, obviously it takes time, commitment, hard work, but you also got to get really lucky in this business too. And I think we all know that.
Yeah, certainly. And I think for one, going back to like your first job at Science Hill, I mean, like high school baseball, now you're a pitching coach and in a Power 5 school. And I think there's something to be said from, and I did the same thing. My first coaching job was, I'm not a Power 5 school, but my first job was a high school freshman head coach. And I think, again, not to like give us a lot of credit because I think we're more awesome than other people, but like there is something to be said about going through the process of different levels of baseball and working your way up and, experiencing different things and getting that in-game experience that everybody's trying to get. Everybody wants that experience, but I don't know if people realize how valuable that is, and especially doing it at different levels.
100%, and having to be creative. Sometimes when we're coaching really talented players, we don't have to be that creative and figuring out a way for them to be successful. But when you're coaching high school and you're coaching NAIA and you're looking for any little edge you can give a guy, and sometimes that it kind of stretches you, makes you think outside the box. And I had as much fun coaching those guys as I do these guys. I mean, it's I was fortunate enough to talk to my alma mater during the COVID stuff. They had me on a Zoom and I got to talk to those guys. And one of the players asked me, said, is the biggest difference between your guys and guys that you coach at this level, how hard they work? And I was like, no, not at all. Like the guys worked out hard at every level we've been at. It's just, and that's what makes it fun is you see a guy who's really grinding. I coached, Ethan Fleener, a kid I remember really worked hard and at Milligan. And when he had success, man, I felt as good as I do anytime. Cause you know how much it means to those guys. And I think coaching at those lower levels will keep your ego batted down a little bit, but also make you be creative in the way that you want to get guys better.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think there's challenges regardless of where you're at. There's perks of being different places. Like you said, I had a lot of fun coaching high school baseball. I did it for 6 years. I had a blast, and then I got into junior college and it was like, oh, this is different, now you're dealing with a different level of guy. And it's just, it's changing and adapting, but I don't think anything's necessarily good or bad. And I don't think for guys trying to get into coaching, it's necessarily a bad move to get into high school, junior college, because you get those opportunities to be in the dugout, be in the game, learn from things that are actually happening, learning to deal with players, like learning to deal with the emotions and the ups and downs of players, and not just like, this looks good, so hey, go do it and we'll address the rest later.
Oh, 100%. And getting to make mistakes, getting to fail and not being afraid to fail. That's the toughest part if you get your first job on a big stage, is like, oh man, I don't want to do anything that, kind of outside the box, or I might screw up. Well, not to say that you want to fail when you start, but you're not afraid to take chances. You're not afraid to do things. It's funny you said that about the same challenges. I was fortunate when I first got to coaching. I got to spend some time with Pat Murphy when he was at Arizona State. So I was out there talking to him, and he said, and I'll never forget this. He said, well, we got the same problems. We'll have a lot to talk about. I was like, I'm at Milligan College. I don't think we had the same problems. And he's like, oh, absolutely we do. He's like, mine might be named a little bit different, but they're the same problems. And he was right. And we did have a lot to talk about and a lot to compare notes on. So I thought that was pretty cool, and something I've always thought about when I've been coaching, is that the problems are the same everywhere. It's dealing with kids. It's dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds or 14 to 18-year-olds, and dealing with egos and emotions and feelings and all those things that we constantly battle every single day.
And I think that gets lost in the translation sometimes, because like you said, 14 to 18 may be one issue, but at the end of the day, those kids they're people, and you're coaching people first, and they're not where they want to be, and they're ultimately working for something different. And then you get into college and it's the same exact thing. They're just a little bit older. They've got a family, whether they're near them or they're away, that they're talking to. Good, bad, whatever the coach is doing, like there's still the dinner table conversations. They might just be happening over the phone now. So everybody's dealing with something. And in the end, like, we're just coaching people that are trying to achieve something.
Yeah, 100%. And all we're trying to do is give them the tools to be successful. And we're supposed to be there for the bad times, when they're good, like anybody can do it, they can roll the balls out and really good players can play, but we're supposed to be there to kind of to make the valleys a little shorter, and that's where I think as a coach, you can really make your way is is when those guys struggle, can you shorten that length of time that they struggle?
Yeah. It's funny. You mentioned Joel Mangram. I didn't know you were with Mangram at Milligan. Joel, I got to know him very little, just a couple of conversations, but through Joel Pedretti, actually, because, him and Joel Pedretti go back, both Joels. And then when he went to New Mexico State and I was at New Mexico, we got to know each other a little bit, and he was a good resource for me. He was always a good conversation for me as well. For me trying to move from like a volunteer position into a full-time position. And he was always a good resource. I always thought very highly of Joel Mangram.
Yeah, I learned a lot about kind of the one thing I thought he was really good at when I was at Milligan was the mental side of things. He was really good at getting our guys in a really good framework to be successful. And I learned a lot because that's not anything I had done before. I just not really thought about that piece of it. I was always like, oh, mechanics and this, and we do this throwing program, and it'll get them right. And it's like, well, there's another side of it too.
Yeah. So when we met was up in Alaska in 2011, probably 11 or 12.
Yeah. 11 and 12. Yeah.
Yeah. What was your pitching coach one year and then head coach the next year? What was your experience like up there? And I mean, obviously I enjoyed getting to know you and getting to hang out off the field with you as well. But, talk about your Alaska experience a little bit.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. The reason I got an opportunity up there was one of my players went in 2010. He was a closer for us, Jason Trivet, and he pitched really well for the minors. And they really liked him there just as a person. And Pete, the GM, called and said, "Hey, really appreciate you sending this guy to me. Is there anything I can do for you?" And I said, "Well, if you ever have a job open, let me interview for it." He said, "Well, it's funny you said that. We just hired a head coach, and we don't have a pitching coach yet, so I'll give you his number." And so Brian Yockey was the guy, and I reached out to him. We connected right away, and he was just phenomenal. I mean, I can't say enough good about Brian just as a person. First off, we had an interesting summer. We had a lot of kids that have to go home that first summer. We had a assistant coach have to go home, and it really, anybody else, it would have been a really difficult summer, but he was unbelievable. I mean, he made it great. Yeah, our players enjoyed it. And then I was fortunate enough the next year to go back up and be the head coach, and I loved it up there. I really did. Yeah. It's part of the country that I would never have went to anyway, just because, why would you go to Alaska? Obviously, when I went up there, I saw why people go. It's unbelievably beautiful. I tell people all the time that you come out of Ted Stevens Airport, you come out of the kind of security, area, and there's all that glass and the mountains right there. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. And then the Highway 1 heading to Palmer, you just drive there and you just can't believe this is real life. It was unbelievable. And then the people I met up there, the person who suggested this Matt Dudas, unbelievable, made a lifelong friend up there. He's our radio guy. He's unbelievable. We text almost all the time. He texts me about lineups. He's like, "Hey, we got Erickson DH today. I never thought I'd see the day." He's a great guy. Made lifelong friends, and then we had a ton of fun. I had a lot of fun competing against you and your club, and you had some really good players too up there. And gosh, the 2 years that I was up there, so many big leaguers came through. Aaron Judge, Braden Shipley, Kyle Freeland,
Wisdom.
Patrick Wisdom. Yeah, the list goes on and on. I mean, that was a really good thing for me to see, because one of the things I thought that really made me grow as a coach is because, man, I had all these players from all these different universities, and I had that in the Southern Collegiate League too, but these were big time names, big time players, and they were going in bullpens, and they were trying to work on the same stuff that our guys were at Milligan. And I'm like, now wait a minute, I thought there was some kind of next level thing and they were trying to do the same stuff. And I realized that hey, the stuff that we're trying to do, it may get a little bit more complex, but it's the same stuff. And just getting connected with coaches from I remember talking to all their pitching coaches and all their head coaches, and just getting a chance to put names, and they know me now. When we went to the ABCA, I could introduce myself. The one thing that I hate now is kind of this idea that you don't need to coach summer ball to move up. It made me so much better. I learned so much from those 6 years I spent coaching summer baseball. I hate that guys think sometimes that that's a step to skip, because to me that was one of the most important things that I did.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is the importance of summer ball. And I agree with you 100%. I think for one, it leads you to, like for me, I was in a junior college when I was up there. And now I've got guys from schools, I mean, coast to coast, coming from different programs, different thought processes. And, I remember when it became very clear to me, was my very first year, at a left-handed hitter up kid from Rice, and there's a runner at second, nobody out. And like, he kind of shoots a ball the other way, like flips at it and flies out to left field. And then we start talking about, try to pull something, man, try to yank a ball, at least get him over. And he, at the time, made it very clear that that's not really something that they did at Rice, during that period. It was just, hey, hit the ball hard wherever it's pitched. And I'm coming from a California junior college where, like, if you get on first base and top of the first inning, like, we're going to bunt them to second.
Yeah,
right. And so, like, it was very different. And then you realize, though, as you move on and you get into Division I baseball, and you've got guys from different areas in the country, and getting into even professional baseball, where now you've got guys from all over the country and all over the world. People play the game differently. So you're adapting also as a coach to different styles that are being played. So then you're trying to implement kind of your beliefs, but allowing guys to have the freedom to play as well. But I touch a little bit more on like the importance and like things you get out of summer ball, because I'm with you. I think it's a huge step that should not be overlooked.
The thing you just said is the most important thing. Is you have to have some, to play in a team environment, even if it's for 40 games in the summer. You have to have some sort of system, and kind of this is the way we're going to do things. But like you said, you've got so many guys that are from that have different beliefs, different systems, all those kinds of things. Convincing them to play inside of the system without changing everything, because you're sending them back to, but just like you said, hey man, here we're going to ask you to try to hit the ball the right side and get that guy over. Being able to have that conversation with the kid and not be confrontational, not be defensive, and be able to respond to the way he takes it is huge, because you don't have that the whole fall to build a relationship. The kid just got there, and it makes you really be on you really know your stuff, because you're going to get questions going to say, well, this is why we don't do that here. And sometimes my mind was changed because a kid would say something and say, hey, okay, that's right. I get the idea there. But yeah. And then just dealing with expectations, those kids, we get it, especially in Alaska, you get guys that are draft year guys that are going to or finishing up their sophomore year, going to go into their draft year, and they think, hey, I got to be a starter up here. I got to get this many innings, and they have all these expectations, and you have to manage 10 guys like that on staff, or 12 guys like that on the staff, and how good the communication has to be day in and day out with guys you don't really know. And I think the best thing for me is I had to have a ton of uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
So conversations that I didn't want to necessarily have, but they make you better, because, you got to sit down in that room and say, listen, I know you came up here to be a starter, but we got 5 of those, and you're just not going to be one of them right now. Keep pitching better, and, see what happens. But yeah, I mean, that part of it. And then just even the staff, you don't know this, maybe you know them a little bit, but you haven't worked with them, day in and day out. And having those personalities mesh, having those thought processes mesh. I mean, when I was up there my first year, my second year as a head coach, we got off to a terrible start, and we had a screaming match in the coach's office because of the way things were going. But it was great, because that's just something you have to learn to do as a coach. You have to learn to deal with other highly motivated type A personalities that they're not always going to agree. And I think it's a great, and there's no third party to kind of step in. You just got to hash it out. You got to figure it out, and also the play in every day is such a big thing, because I used to say all the time, like, my first 6 years in coaching were like 12, because I got a full season every year of games in the summer, and I got to see situations more. I got to see, how guys handled things, how breaking balls work, how changeups work, just because you get double the games. I think it's, as a young coach, when the guys reach out to me for advice, and that's a bad idea to ask me for advice, but some people do, believe it or not. I tell them all the time, camps and summer baseball is 2 of the best things you can do.
I could not agree anymore. I mean, those are, for one, the people that you meet, like you said, the relationships that you create, just because, again, these guys are sending you their players, and you get that conversation with some of these coaches at schools that as a young coach and you're maybe in a position that you're still looking to move up, you're like, man, that's a school I would like to coach at one day. I'm going to keep my connection with that guy going, and those relationships help in the long run, and then, like you said, creating uncomfortable conversations that need to be had. And when you're the head coach, like that's a conversation that's on your plate to have. And especially as a young guy with opportunities to go out and have those conversations with whether it be players or coaches from schools, because you have to be honest with those guys too. When they say, hey,
100%.
how's my guy? Well, he's a turd. Like he doesn't show up on time. He's not doing the right things. And you have to be honest. And that's that. And then I will remember the very first time when I was the head coach up there and the pitching coach walked in and he goes, hey, we got to score 40 today. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, we got about 4 innings of pitching. And, like I hadn't even thought about it, but that was probably the first time where I'm going into a game going, we're going to get smoked. Now, how do I manage this?
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Because it's a real thing.
Yes. And think about, how many times during the week that when you play 3 games and you play another game and you got 2 days off, you don't think about the bullpen management. There's a piece to it, but when you play every day, you have to learn to be good at it. And to be honest, when I first started, I wasn't good at it. And we would look up on days like that and be like, man, we don't have anybody. So, that 7 to 5 game or 7 to 4 game when I threw the closer for 2 innings, probably a bad plan now, So yeah, absolutely. All those things are important. And you talk about building a relationship with coaches. It's funny. I interviewed with Mike Bianco, and one of the things we talked about was Will Jamison playing for us in the summer. And it's a real thing. I mean, it's a real thing that would have never had a chance to have a conversation with Lafferty. Would never had. And then when I interviewed with Bianco, there was something there to talk about because I'd worked one of his camps and we had Will Jamison, so those are real things.
Yeah. Those camps are huge, man. Just getting out and just being on the road, getting used to that, being on the road, getting to know people from other schools, and it's fun, man. I'm sorry, but like doing that volley life really was enjoyable. I would highly suggest to people, like, don't skip that, because going out, doing those camps, meeting people, being on the road, finishing up like an inter squad at your place on like a Friday or Saturday, and then getting on a plane and jetting out for a 2-day camp and then going back to work. It's like, it's a challenge, but it's like your first challenge. And if you want to know what it's like to be on the road recruiting and still coaching your guys and making everybody important, like that's a good way to do it. And you've got a billion names too that you've got to sort through.
Yes. And it does. It makes you better as an evaluator because you have to watch it. You watch a lot of kids and you start to now, everything's about context. And if you don't see enough players, you can't put the good ones or the bad ones in context. And as a volunteer, it's hard to get that context because you don't get to get out, and camps are the best way you can do it. And, you want to show a head coach, how you work, what baseball means to you, all those things. July, when it's 100 degrees and you're on turf and it's a little kids camp, or it's a high school prospect camp, and you're flying around, you have good energy and you're doing your job and you're doing all that. Like, they pay attention to that. I mean, it's the reason why I got a job at Duke. I mean, because I worked Coach Pollard's camp when they were at App, I worked it. When they moved over here, I worked every one. I drove over here, I worked everyone I could work. And he said it in the press release when he hired me that the reason why is because of the way he worked at camp. And I mean, and the 2 guys that we hired to replace my position were both guys that worked our camps.
That's incredible. It's just shows the value of those things. And it's not, reaching out to people, as scary as it can be sometimes, is really the most it's a huge skill to have. And I think for young coaches, especially, just not being afraid to be told no, and not being afraid to say, hey, like, I want to come and work your camp, and I want to come work for you. Like, do it. We're going to say no.
And who cares? I mean, and I think so many guys are kind of crippled by I'm at so-and-so school and they
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It matters 0%. It matters 0%. Just be willing to work, be flexible. And I know when I was hiring for our camps here, I could care less what school. I cared about the person. And if I had met him and worked with other camps with him, like, that guy I can count on. So I know that when I can't be at field B, I know the right things are happening because he's over there. So that idea that, man, I can't talk to those guys because where I'm at, I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. Put yourself out there a little bit. What when you were at ETSU, you were there as the volunteer, right?
Yep.
And then got bumped to pitching coach, recruiting coordinator.
Yeah.
How's that transition going from the volunteer? And this is a conversation I've had with the guys from time to time. When you're the volunteer, you're in a different position with your relationship with the players.
100%.
For one, you can be. For two, I think you kind of have to be. And because I think there's a person they need to have that they can talk to that, you know what, like some of this is going to get filtered and probably go to the head guy, but like there's a piece of it that's going to stay here and you can count 100. On me to have this conversation. How is that adjustment going from being in that volunteer role and being that guy to being now you're the pitching coach, you're recruiting coordinator, you're the full-time guy, and maybe there is a shift in your role or your availability to the players to have that same conversation with you?
Yeah, you're 100% right. As a volunteer, you're a liaison, but you're also, you're a sounding board. Sometimes you're just the guy that they come talk to, and sometimes the way that you message that, you filter it a little bit, and you're supposed to. That's how it works. But yeah, they become the pitching coach. It's a different. It is a different relationship. I think I've heard head coaches talk about it a lot. They get bumped from assistant to head coach. Players are always in their office, then they get the head job, and no one's in there unless there's a problem. I think number one, you just have to be authentic. You can't try to be somebody you're not, because players will see right through it. I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I'm not a yeller or screamer. I can be frustrated like everybody, but for the most part, I'm pretty even tempered. So I didn't try to do anything different except for, I tried to be really honest about, I think, maybe Lasorda said it, if you tell them the truth, they'll hate you for a day. If you lie to them, they'll hate you for forever. So I think just you can be a little bit more of the, the back patter cheerleader as the volunteer, but when you're, in charge of a position, you got to sometimes just shoot them straight. And it's sometimes, again, it's stuff they don't want to hear, but you got to tell them, like, and I have a great success story that I always think about when we get to the, Daniel Sweeney is a kid I coached at East Tennessee. When I got the pitching job, he was coming in as a freshman. He's now their volunteer, does an unbelievable job at East Tennessee. He's an up and comer. He's going to be a guy. He's not skipping any steps. He's doing it the right way. He's going to be really good. But his first bullpen, I told him, I said, Daniel, your stuff's not good enough to pitch here. It's just that needs to be your focus, making your stuff better. Big old 6'6" kid, played basketball in high school, really good athlete. And the kid did not like to hear it, which no one does. Okay. But the next day there was no kind of feeling sorry for himself or anything. He went to work, and for a while you didn't see anything. In inter squads, he was getting beat up. Then towards the end of the year, it's like, man, he's throwing some sim games. Like, he's making some pitches. Like, it's getting better. The bullpen started getting better. Next thing you know, the next year he gets some opportunities. He pitches well. Probably should have had some more opportunities. And then, goes into a junior and senior year, and he's a weekend starter for him. He pitches great. It earns we all want to be really successful, but you know what he did? He earned the respect of his teammates and his coaches, and that's why he got a job coaching there. They created a director of operations position to keep him because how much they respected him. Then he moved into the vol spot because he earned his teammates' respect. And so, a little off topic from your question, but I think you got to be honest with guys, and you just got to shoot them straight. And there has to be a little bit more distance between you, because as you can definitely be a resource for these guys, but there's going to come a time when you have to discipline them. There's going to be a time when you have to tell them something they don't want to hear. And as we know, it's hard to do with your friends, so obviously we want to be there for them, but we're kind of like father figures out, when they're there for us, when their parents kind of drop them off for us. But just like your dad, he doesn't mind to get on you. You got to be able to have that. You can't have that moment where you pause and say, oh, I don't want to get on him because of our relationship,
It's, you almost have to be the uncle, like you can tell me stuff, but like, doesn't mean I'm not going to whoop your butt.
Yeah. 100%. 100. That's a great way of thinking of it.
Yeah. So you ETSU, you finish up there after 5 years, correct?
So I was there. So 3 as a pitching coach, 1 as a volunteer. So 4 years.
4 years at ETSU. Then like I said, you're in a position where you're looking for a job, and Duke comes up and get an opportunity again, like you said, based on the work that you've done, being around the staff, being around the head coach, and having him see your body of work. What is your role immediately upon, getting to Duke?
Yeah, so I was the director of operations, and I was really fortunate because when I got here, TrackMan was being installed literally a month later, and none of us had any experience in it, and I just basically said, "I'll figure it out," And it was a large undertaking, but what it allowed me to do, this is not a knock on the director of operations position at all, but I wanted to be able to say at the end of the day, when we won or lost, I had something to do with it, other than the meals and the hotels. And
Yeah.
I wanted to feel like in the dugout that I impacted us winning or losing. And I thought the data was the number one way to do it. I said, this is my avenue. So I kind of went in it full bore. We built a little analytics team. We started doing in-house stuff, and really just tried to kind of really be at the forefront of using it for player development. And luckily our staff was really receptive to it. We've got unbelievable staff. Jason Steen, our hitting coach, is one of the best in the country. Josh Jordan won ABCA Assistant Coach of the Year in 19. And then our head coach, I think Coach Pollard's best head coach in the country. And those guys were really open to it. And what the thing that we did was we asked questions, and we were said, hey, is this what we're doing? Is this working? And we were able to use the data, and sometimes it was yes, sometimes it was no. And those guys were willing to kind of make changes and do things differently based on what the data was telling us. So that was how kind of I had my opportunity to show our staff my baseball IQ and how and my work ethic and how I was going to go about things. And one of the things that I think was great was Coach involved me in every meeting, every staff meeting. When we had lineups and pitching talks, I was right there. I got to give my 2 cents, and sometimes we took my suggestions, sometimes we didn't, but it gave me that opportunity to kind of show Coach what where I was as a baseball person, not just as an operations person. And so I was fortunate enough that he believed in me enough to give me an opportunity. And to be honest, there wasn't like another Power Five was going to come and pluck me out of the operations position to go be a pitching coach. This was the place that I needed to make that. And to be honest, I stuck around. I had some other opportunities at times for other jobs, but I stuck around because I really this is where I wanted to be because of the group of guys that the coaches I got to work with. And obviously we're super talented. We bring in unbelievable players. So it obviously makes my job a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. And working for a head coach that gives you your place on the staff, like you have your job, this is your thing, do it, dominate it, and like you've got this, and then when it's done and it's done well and there's quality work behind it and having it be recognized, I think that's such a good thing for assistants to see and feel from that head coach. And so that just increases the loyalty, like huge increase when that guy's giving you a job to do and you're able to do it and he respects the fact that you're going out and doing it.
Yeah. And I would have never thought to ask those type of questions until I got here. But I tell guys all the time, when you're interviewing, talk to the assistants and is your job description clear? Are there milestones for you to hit for you can, hey, we are getting better in the area that I'm in charge of, and obviously it's easy when it's the hitting coach or pitching coaches are giving up more runs or less runs. But when those other jobs as volunteer, director of operations, director of player development, these new roles that are coming, it's really important to have that because that's how you can sell yourself, not just at that program, but other programs, and we're all trying to, even if it's not move on, we're all trying to better our profile, better what we, have some validation for what we do, and see if it works. And I think that, the where it all starts is your head coach. I work for an unbelievable one. He holds you accountable, and no doubt about it. I mean, it's not easy, and it shouldn't be. But when you clearly know what's your, kind of your role, your preview, and and you don't, there not a lot of pats on the back, but there's the satisfaction of, hey, you're doing it, you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you're getting it done at a high level. And obviously the bar is set really high here.
Yeah. And if you're doing it for the pats on the back, probably not going to last really long. Yeah. Those pats are few and far between sometimes. So find your why outside of the pat on the back.
No doubt.
the analytics, the numbers, the data, the technology, all that stuff obviously is becoming more important. And, we use it at our level like crazy. And it's obviously getting into college baseball, and the programs that can afford that stuff are really diving into the numbers and the data and the technology like head first and really getting into it. Where do you see the impact the most, I guess you would say, with the availability to those numbers that you guys have, and the advantage that you have by having those things available to you? How do you guys use that like to your advantage?
I think the best way to describe it is, if you have this continuum where a guy needs to be, on this side it's four seam curveball guy, and on this side it's a sinker slider guy, and he's so much closer to four seam curveball guy, but we didn't know that in the past, so we might be trying to go the other way, and it's such a further jump. But now with the data, we can look immediately and say, hey, you're really close to having an outlier in this direction. So we know what direction is the shortest path, to him being different. And that's what we're looking for on the pitching side, is something to be an outlier and something that you can kind of lean on. So I think that's the start. And same thing with hitters. We get, Kyle Gallagher's a guy that came into our program. Cornell guy, was unbelievable athlete. When he got here, he had unbelievable exit velos, but everything was a 6.3. I mean, he's hitting 110, but he's hitting it at the shortstop. And it's so clear to you. You can just show it to him and say, look, man, the reason why you're not having the success you're capable of having is because you're not hitting your launch angles are terrible. We have to make that better. So, and obviously you say, well, yeah, you could see that with your eyes. Yes, but you don't get instant feedback in the cage, on the field. Every time that he takes a swing with the bat, there's that boom, it pops up right away, and he knows like yay or nay, data gets such a bad rap, like that it's, it's ruining the game because this and that. The reality is that it's just information. People are still processing it. People are still using it. It's just information. I think the people that become better I think that we're getting to a stage where everyone's going to have some sort of ball tracking for the most part. Everybody's going to have some sort of ball tracking data. So everyone's going to have some sort of pre-contact data for hitters, whether it be blast or whatever. What's going to separate you now is, can you get buy-in from your players? Can you use it efficiently so that it's all about investment costs. How long does it take to make him better? At your level, if it takes a guy 7 years to get to where it doesn't matter that it works. It takes too long for it to work, and we're in the same boat. If it takes us 3 years for the guy to be good enough, it's too long. So how can we narrow that investment cost for making those guys better, quicker? And I think the first thing that you can knock out is kind of the ambiguity of, is that really what's happening? Well, we know for sure this is what's happening. And so that box is checked. Here's what's happening. How can we get it to, here's where you need to be, here's where we're at, let's go in that direction. So to me, that's where it's being used the best. But I think also the players having access to it, that's the next step, is teaching your guys, because they're getting it more and more. We should be giving it to them more and more. We have our players access to it all the time, but educating those guys so they know they can make those adjustments themselves. They can start learning what it means. When am I good? I'm in this range when I'm good. Okay, well, I start to relate, tilt numbers with how I feel. And now all of a sudden I can make adjustments on the mound without seeing TrackMan, because I know, hey, my ball typically does this when I'm at where I'm supposed to be. It's not doing that. I've got to make an adjustment. So I think those things are hugely important, and just get the value of being able to do it, be able to see that information right after a rep is, I think that's what's so important.
And I think you're right on with the fact that like the data itself, just a pure number, like, I don't know that that's necessary. I think that is being taken right now as like, that's showing you a result, and there's not a feel incorporated with that result. And like you said, yes, you have that tilt, and this is how I felt. And now it's like, okay, let's recreate that feel and see if that recreates this number, and not just, okay, well, this was this exit velo, so I'm going to swing harder now and see if it's not necessarily that. Like, is there a bat path issue that's creating a lack of the launch angle that you're desiring, or, a whatever it might be, but like, what's the correlation between what you did and what that number is? And because sometimes it's just a measurement, and it's like exit velo off the tee. It looks awesome and it's sweet, but like that tells you nothing about what type of a hitter you are. You might have the ability to do that, but does that mean you can hit? Like, no. But if you take a good swing and you're getting some sort of a metric that shows that the swing, the, path, whatever it is that Blast is measuring, and then the exit velo is there, now you're putting things together that incorporate two different types of data, as well as how'd I move, what I do.
Yeah, 100%. You hit the nail on the head. It's a naked number is nothing. I mean, it's nothing without context. It's nothing. And that's my argument sometimes with what we see sometimes with like pitch design is like, oh, we want to get to this this IBB number. Well, hey, there's so many things that go into that just chasing that naked number is not going to make you better. It may make you worse. And so just and that's where I think the education for the players is so important, so that, because again, they're going to get this, if you don't educate them, Twitter will, and that's usually a bad thing.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, exactly. So, you're 100% right. It's about because all we're trying to do is get you to be able to perform on the field, and on the field, you're not going to get instant feedback from pitch to pitch. You're going to still have to have feel and be able to make adjustments on the fly. And let's also not forget the number one thing you got to do is compete. And sometimes we forget that when we stare at numbers and say, well, we want to do this. Well, you're still getting hit. Like, like, can you pay attention? We got to compete better,
Do you, like you said, you're getting those guys that are you closer to the, two seam sinker slider type guy, or the four seam with ride, we're going to throw up in the zone, with the curveball type guy? Are you looking at how you can, like, what if a guy, for example, comes to you and he does have that four seam ride and he can pitch at the top of the zone, but the curveball just doesn't really have much shape. I mean, he'll land it for like a get ahead strike, but like he's got that put away, slider, where he may not have something on that other axis. You know what I mean? It's going to bear in on a guy. Like, is that something that you take into consideration when you're trying to put together like maybe a 2-pitch mix with a put away? Like, how does that come into play with designing how that guy's going to attack hitters?
Yeah, 100%. It's great to think like, oh, we're all the four seam guys going to have these nice 12-6 break. It just doesn't work that way. So sure. What you have to learn is, which each guy is like, how does your pitch in this location play? And the only way to find that out is against hitters. Like, the numbers may not look great, but man, when you throw it in this bottom third quadrant, you're getting a lot of success. I mean, we've seen it with guys that don't have extremely, and honestly, it teaches us stuff. Sometimes we see guys that don't have great IBB numbers, but for whatever reason, every time they make a mistake up in the zone, it's a swing and miss. And it's like, wait a minute, hang on now. Like, maybe we should design to do this more. I think, trying to, this idea that we have to, every pitch needs to tunnel and be hidden by another pitch and we sequence it. It's just not realistic. It's not the way, and it's never going to be the way you pitch anyway. It may be the way you pitch pinch hitters, but so what if these two pitch combos work really great, but you're facing Mike Trout and he's hitting 500 on, fastballs, we're probably going to do something different, So yeah, I think you always got to work with him, what he does and what he does well. I just think, again, when you see something that is close to an outlier, independently of everything else, like that just tells you, like, I think it tells you more about usage than anything. Like there are some like used to, we called them crafty lefties, but now we learned there's something to that. And instead of being afraid to throw a fastball or afraid to throw too many curveballs, like we learned that, like, no, this works for a reason. I tell guys all the time, if you can't figure out, like, in your stuff why guys are having trouble hitting it, they're only having trouble because hitting's hard. Like there's a reason always. If you're having a lot of success with one pitch, there's a reason, and it may just simply be location, but there is a reason. And I think that's such a valuable tool, because we can give that to the guy and say, hey, this area with this pitch, if you can get it there, you have your most success. And so to get the commitment to get it there, it's a lot easier when you can show them numbers and say, hey, this is where you're at. But yeah, to your question, like you just can't chase like making everybody, IVB separated by 30 inches and all, you just can't chase that because not everybody's capable of doing that. And it's in trying to get there is not always going to give you the best version of each guy either.
How important is it to you for a young coach coming up to be, well versed in these things, whether it's a different type of tech, the different, what the numbers mean? Like if your volunteer leaves and a guy with a pitching background wants to contact you about a job, like, are you going to ask him about his knowledge of tech and the numbers and the usage of the numbers and what they provide? I mean, how important is that? And like the certifications that are out there that guys are doing, how important are those types of things, you think?
Yeah, I think the certifications are interesting. I think if they're too new to tell, if that's, kind of the route we need to go, but having the knowledge of tech, I think is important now, especially at the higher levels that have access to it. I don't think it's a begin all end all though. I don't think that, because we do this in every industry, but there's like this idea, this barrier to entry that like, there's this idea that it's so tough. It's so, it's really tough. Listen, I'm not an extremely smart person. And I got here with really no background other than reading Fangraph articles, and was able to, I shouldn't say figured out because we all got a long way to go to figure it out, but was able to get myself up to speed in a way that we could help our program in a pretty quick way. So I think what's more important is the willingness to question what you believe. The willingness to have what you believe questioned is more important than being able to read an Excel file, because anyone can learn to do that. But if you don't have the inner drive to want to be better and say, well, I don't care that I've taught this forever, it's wrong, and I want to change, then it doesn't matter. You can have all tech in the world and they're going to make you better. So I think that's more important than, again, we can teach anybody to read an Excel file and what these numbers mean, how they play against each other. And we're learning new stuff every day with it. I think what's more important is that you're willing to question what you believe and how you do things. That's where I see guys getting better.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you need to be able to be challenged and be questioned and question yourself and allow yourself to be questioned. And don't be afraid to say, yeah, maybe that's not the best way to do things.
Or to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, so many guys refuse to say that. And the reality is so many things we do not know. And we act like we do. We don't. I'm the first to say, I don't know a lot of things. Yeah. We think we do. We think this works and this relates with these things, but sometimes we see things that go, wait a minute, maybe that doesn't, and that's where you can get better, because with each individual guy, different things are going to matter, and they're going to matter at different degrees. Some guys, raw spin doesn't matter at all for guys that get a lot of rifle spin or what, and then there are guys with 12 o'clock tilt that raw spin really matters. So, being able to understand that you're not we don't have it figured out, we don't know everything, that's so much more important than like I said, being able to read an Excel file.
Now, when you've been ABCA is going for years, and I've done the same, and you have, like you said, the Twitter phenomenon going on right now, and there's people that are doing a lot of stuff, putting out a lot of information, the tech stuff, the certifications, all those things. There's so much information available to coaches right now. It's unreal, more than ever before. Where do you kind of, I would say, draw the line, or how do you decide as a coach, whether it's at Duke or whether it's at, your first job at Science Hill, or coaches that are listening right now that are coaching in high school? Like, how do you take all of that information and figure out like what works for me, for my program, for the personnel that I have, for the resources that I have? Like where do you start with all that and taking the information and using it to the best of your advantage?
Yeah. And that's a tough question, because that's what everybody, that's what I was thinking about at East Tennessee, like, how do I'm reading some of this stuff. How do I'm playing catch with Blake Smith, and I think his ball's got high spin, but I don't have any way to measure it. Like, I don't know. So I think that continuing to educate yourself is hugely important. I think everyone understands that. That's why we go to these things. But what I do think is that whenever you're going to put something in play with your players, you have to know that you understand it fully, because kids today are going to ask why. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
say, well, why are we doing this? I've read this, or I've seen this, and this says we shouldn't do this. So why are we doing this? And I think it's 100% okay for kids to be asking that. And can you give a cognitive good reason why you're doing what you're doing? So I always, and I don't, somebody's told me this, but I always had a 1-year rule on the ABCA stuff. We did not put it in. If I learned something at ABCA and we're going to have kids back in January, 5 days after the ABCA, I'm not putting things I just learned in the ABCA in play because I don't understand them well enough,
And
so
we've all done that.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. But I think the one thing that I think that I didn't do well in the early part of my career and have done better is when you see people on Twitter talk about stuff that you don't quite understand, reach out to them. Mm-hmm. Like, get on the phone, I mean, everybody's got Zoom now, which is, it's a great tool. And ask questions and tell that coach, hey, here's my situation. Would this work here? How would you do it if you had these resources? And also, it's just like reading a book. You don't have to agree with everything you read. Like you may say, no, that I don't believe that. And that's fine. That doesn't make that person right. That person wrong, you right, wrong. It just means for me, it doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. We play guys all the time. And I have a lot of respect for a lot of the pitching coaches that we've played so far. And I watch what they do because I'm trying to learn. I'm like, hey, all right, Joey Loperfita is really good left-handed hitter. How do they call the game against him? What do they do? Okay, I see that. And some of it's different than what I would do. And it doesn't make them wrong. It just, it fits their system. And you have to, it has to all work together, because one thing that you put in there that kind of negates other things you do, players start to go, wait a minute, now why? He said we don't believe in this, but we're doing something very similar to that. So I think it's in this idea that we're missing out, and like you can't be successful if you don't have this or you don't talk about this, is ridiculous. I mean, there are a lot of coaches out there that are really successful that don't make it too complicated and really have their guys compete and play baseball the old school way, and they're successful. That doesn't mean it worked for you, but it does for them, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And like you see at your level, there are varying degrees of kind of buy-in from pro teams, and some of them are successful, some of them aren't, on both ends of the spectrum. So I think it's all got to be, again, like what I taught you, it has to be authentic to you. You have to believe in, you can't ever, and I've been guilty of this as a coach. I've ran out things that I didn't really believe in, but I was like, that sounded cool. And I want to be on the cutting edge. So we're going to try this. And I don't really believe in it, So I think it has to be something that you truly believe in. And the only way you're going to get there is having conversations and making sure you get to the, Coach Blake, Dusty Blake, who's here before us, he was a savant with TrackMan stuff. I mean, a savant. I mean, he's unbelievable. I can't go about things the exact same way he does because I don't have that depth of knowledge with the way that he did things. So if I tried to do exactly what I'd fall flat on my face because I'm not there. That's not me. But I do think there's another way to do it.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned something about things like matching up. And I think that goes from a philosophical standpoint of like what you want to, what kind of let's, for example, like a team offense. If your team offense is a West Coast, like we're going to get them on, get them over, get them in. And, you want to teach that, hard-nosed, tough mentality. Like we're going to wear it. We're going to steal bases. We're going to hit the ball on the ground the other way and be tough with 2 strikes. But you're teaching a swing that is straight uphill to create this launch angle because it's out there now. It's sexy, and it's for everybody's talking about it. That physical movement doesn't match up with what your team's philosophy is. So like, you're not going to have that buy-in from players when you're trying to get one result accomplished, but you're teaching a mechanic that provides something different.
100%. That's a great analogy. I'll use that. I probably won't credit you, but I'll because that's 100% what it is. It'd be like, it's like a pitching coach talking about being quick to home, but in the bullpen, you're like, hey man, lift that leg higher and throw as hard as you can. Like, well, okay, those two things don't work.
Yeah, match them up, and as long as I think as long as there's consistency there, the players are going to see that they're gonna respect that there's consistency, right or wrong. Like we can live and die with that.
And teams win with different styles. In baseball, you see it in College World Series, those styles collide. You get a West Coast team that does it a certain way, and then you get another team from a Power Five do it a different way, and that's what makes baseball great. You don't have to do it the same way. It's all about how many runs guys touch home plate, and how you get there doesn't matter.
Let me ask you this: if you're you're a high school coach, junior college, maybe even mid-major Division I that's not well funded, or any position that's not as well funded as like a Power Five school like Duke, where again, like I did it before, and I laugh when you talk about the ABCA, because I remember going one year and Tim Corbin was talking about having like their fielding percentage kept during practice, and he's talking about how he's got during BP and during ground balls, and guys are charting it. And I was like, this is so cool, man. Like, this is the best idea ever. Like, I'm going to revolutionize junior college baseball. I took it back to our head coach, and he goes, yeah, that sounds great. Who's going to do it? He's like, you're throwing BP. I'm in the bullpen, and our other coaches, standing behind the hitters. Like, who's going to do that?
Yeah.
So it's like, it has to match up, and you have to, if you don't have the resources for it, it's easy to say, okay, well, you can do that because you have the resources. If you're somewhere that doesn't have those resources, what is a piece of like technology or training stuff that you guys use, or you've seen use, that you really like or think is really beneficial?
Yeah. The Blast is a cheaper type, because you don't have to have one for each player. You can have one guy, and we've done it where, one guy in one cage, you flip it on when you go in that cage, and we have the TV there that they can see. So, that's the obviously Rapsodo is a cheaper option than TrackMan in the bullpen. Diamond Kinetics had sent us some balls, those things, they seem to be fairly accurate, it's a cheaper type thing. But to be honest with you, one thing that Kyle Bunn did, we had a kind of a side armor, and he put a piece of tape around the ball, and he would video with his iPhone and just show it. And at the time, I didn't know he was teaching tilt, but that's what he was doing, And so there's ways to do it without, super. We have an Edgertronic camera, for super slow mo, but I can get almost as much done with my iPhone with slow mo if I just get in the right spot for a grip, and I can show it to him right away and say, hey man, this is what I mean when I say under your slider. Like, this is what it looks like. So I think it goes back to being creative, and finding ways to, there's nothing wrong with like, kind of reverse engineering stuff. Like, hey, this data point's important, and they've got this really fancy thing to get there, but how can I do it without that? Just like we teach tilt. Well, Kyle Bunn found a pretty easy way to do that with a marker and some tape on a baseball. So I think being creative, don't try to put yourself in a box like, and I also think, don't use we don't have money and don't have funding as an excuse either. It's not an excuse for not finding a way to get your players better. Is it harder? Absolutely. It's harder. But you can still do it, and I think you'll have a little more satisfaction getting it done that way than you do, when, you get this fancy thing, you set it up and it comes to your iPad. Well, that's good, but it's not. We had a lot of fun drawing. When I got the job, I was like, man, I'm gonna draw some markers on some baseballs, get these guys, get the tilt right. But yeah, I think just being creative and not putting yourself in a box and saying, well, we just can't do it because we don't have this or don't have that. Like, what do you have? What can you create? Like we used to at East Tennessee, we just charted bullpens. We'd have a little strike zone and a different colored pin for which, and so we would say, hey, all your breaking balls are on this side, all your swing and miss are down here. Well, now we have TrackMan that'll show us that, but it was the same stuff with our pitcher sitting in the stands doing it,
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, everyone's got a phone, and that slow mo is pretty good, whether it's hitting, pitching, whatever it is. And then I still agree. I think there was a point where charting it and writing things down on yourself. I mean, even when I was in New Mexico, we had the catchers chart themselves.
Yeah.
And now you got to grade yourself out, you know, and if you think you're sweet, give yourself a good grade. And if you think you weren't very good today, hey, be honest with yourself. But I think that's one of the issues that I think are holding people back, is they think they have to have the tech to make guys better. Obviously it is helpful, clearly, but find a way, man, like figure it out. And it's not you can't replicate a TrackMan, so don't try it. But there's other things that you can do to give yourself a feel or to see something and actually like visually help you.
And the reality is your players deserve it. They deserve your best effort to make them as good as it. You know, just because a guy doesn't play at a higher level, he deserves the same. And what I love about it is most of the small school guys I run into are the biggest grinders, the guys that are the ones that I go to Head First. We do those Head First honor roll camp, and I get to meet a lot of guys, and a lot of them from smaller schools and stuff. And man, it just, those guys, I gravitate towards those guys more than I do, just because like we're kindred spirits. That's where I'm from. Yeah. That's what and I'm amazed. I learned so much just from talking shop with those guys before and after, because they do get creative. They have to, and that's what this business is about. I mean, the reason why we're at the point that we're at is because someone got creative and said, man, it would be nice to know how many times the ball spins before it gets to home. And now there's a fancy thing that does that, but it started with just creativity.
Yep. I agree. You're totally right. I mean, that creativity as a coach, I mean, that's fun. And not only that, but I think as your players see that you're trying, you're thinking outside the box, they know you don't have the resources, but hey, like, we're going to try, we're going to put a black line on this baseball and we're going to see how it spins. That's been done for years.
Yeah.
Like we did that when I was playing, like in the 90s, but I mean, that's been done forever. You know, we used to put pennies inside of a tennis ball and throw it. And that was like our weighted ball program.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, get a little creative, and no, it's not going to be, the flashy stuff you see all over the place, but like there's ways, and it's better than nothing. So find something that you can do. And yeah, you get some real enjoyment out of that, I think. And so will the players.
100%. And like you said, when players see that you're trying and just think about it yourself. If you showed up to the ballpark and you saw a coach had made something for you to make you better, like I would be like, holy cow, like, yeah, this guy cares about me. He's at night thinking about ways to make me better. Like, that's what it's about.
I agree. I'm with you 100%, man. Well, dude, I'm not gonna take up your whole day, but I really appreciate this conversation. I was going to ask you about advice for coaches, but I think this whole thing has been really good advice. But is there one thing to kind of sum it up in terms of any advice for coaches that are either looking to get into college or move up in the ranks of college?
Yeah, I would say two things. One, don't ever turn down an opportunity to work, whether it be at a camp or, whenever you can get an opportunity to get more baseball, to coach more kids, take it. I've done everything from, travel teams. I coached when I was at Milligan in the fall and things like that. Always find an opportunity to coach. But then, the biggest thing to me is that there's never a perfect opportunity out there. There's never a perfect time to leave. Yeah. I see so many coaches think like, well, I can't leave because this isn't right, or that isn't right, or the money isn't right, or, you've got to take chances in this business, and some of them aren't going to work out, and that's okay. I mean, mine sure hasn't been a straight line. No one's is a straight line. You're going to stub your toe, but you're never going to make it without taking chances. And, I came in, I met my wife in Johnson City. She's from Johnson City. Her family's there. I came in and said, hey, we've got to move to Durham, and I'm going to move, and I'll be there for 3 months before you get there. And, this is happening. Hey, I'm moving from Milligan, full-time job with benefits. I'm going to take a job at East Tennessee with no benefits and no pay. And we're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
So there are always going to be drawbacks to every job, but if you want to keep moving in this business, you've got to take chances, and it's the same thing we ask our players to do. We ask walk-ons to take chances on us all the time. We ask guys with low scholarship, take a chance to come here and it's going to work out. Well, we got to be able to have that same faith and take those opportunities too, because they're going to make you better, whether it's good or bad.
Yep. I'm with you, man. Dude, really appreciate it. That was awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I wish you guys the best of luck the rest of the season.
Appreciate it, Cap. I enjoyed talking to you anytime, man. We've made it too long, too long. We'll have to catch up more frequently than this for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna need a few more of these, I think.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Talk soon.
Yeah.